Friday afternoon in Pensacola, Florida started with normal errands and slow-moving traffic outside the Home Depot on North Davis Highway. Inside the store, workers moved scanners across shelves as they counted inventory and verified stock numbers for their employer. The aisles were tall, and the orange metal racks stretched overhead. Most shoppers were browsing for lumber, paint, or lawn supplies. No one expected gunfire. At 2:25 p.m., emergency dispatchers became flooded with calls from terrified customers. Voice after voice shouted over the phone that shots were being fired inside the store. Callers reported a young woman on the floor who was no longer moving. Employees yelled for everyone to run toward the front doors and keep going until they reached the parking lot. Several said the shooter had sprinted out of the entrance only seconds earlier. Responding deputies from the Escambia County Sheriff's Office reached the store quickly. They kept their patrol vehicles parked at angles to prevent cars from entering. They followed training and cleared the building row by row. When they reached aisle 52, they saw a young woman on the floor. She had collapsed next to boxes of screws and plastic tool bins scattered across the concrete. Responders assessed her condition. She had been hit several times. Her pulse was gone. 2 co-workers nearby had injuries from grazing bullets, but were awake and shocked. Paramedics helped those employees to a safer space outside. Detectives photographed the aisle. They marked 6 shell casings from a 9mm handgun and 3 projectiles that had lodged in products. Shoppers gathered outside behind taped-off lines. Phones recorded the police activity near the garden center exit. No one was allowed back inside, and no one was permitted to leave the parking lot until deputies secured all witnesses. A supervisor for the inventory crew paced near the entrance, demanding answers. Her name was Sheila. She told deputies that the victim was Brooklyn, an 18-year-old mother who traveled with the company to perform inventory at different stores. Brooklyn had been cheerful that morning and excited to finish early to FaceTime her daughter. Witnesses recalled that a man walked directly into the aisle, spoke briefly, and then raised a gun and fired repeatedly. One worker told deputies he heard the man say, "You think I'm playing with you?" seconds before the shooting. While deputies processed the scene, another call came in from Pensacola police. Officers patrolling near Davis Highway had located a Glock 19 handgun thrown near the roadway. A single round was lying close to the pistol. The weapon had scratches consistent with being tossed from a moving vehicle. The information matched witness statements that the shooter fled on foot toward Davis Highway. Deputies requested dogs to track the scent, and detectives canvassed nearby businesses for surveillance footage. Meanwhile, ambulances transported the injured workers for evaluation. Brooklyn remained in place until crime scene technicians finished their work. Detectives later learned that Brooklyn had sustained multiple wounds to her torso, head, and shoulders. The medical report estimated at least 7 shots had struck her. The event lasted less than 15 seconds from the moment the man entered the aisle to the moment he ran out of the store. Witnesses said there was no loud argument, no physical fight, and no attempt by the man to conceal his identity during the attack. A full sweep of the store took more than an hour. Workers remained outside under the heat of the Florida sun. Many were crying. Some called their families. Others stared forward without speaking, overwhelmed by how fast a normal day turned into a crime scene. Detectives needed to understand whether the victim knew the shooter. They asked Sheila about Brooklyn's life, her daughter, and whether there were any recent conflicts. Sheila said Brooklyn had a child with her son Keith. She insisted that they had no serious issues and that the relationship had ended long ago. Several co-workers confirmed that the shooting looked targeted, not random. The gunman walked past several employees without acknowledging them before confronting Brooklyn. While detectives spoke with witnesses, supervisors began arranging transportation to hotels for the inventory crew. Brooklyn's co-workers were in shock. One young worker bent over with his hands on his knees as he tried to explain what he saw to deputies. He described the moment Brooklyn turned her head slightly and replied, "Not this again," before the shot started. He said there was no chance for her to run. Media outlets posted alerts within minutes. Reporters gathered outside the parking lot and recorded live segments describing the chaos. Social media users uploaded videos taken as they fled the store. Most viewers assumed it was another senseless random shooting. Investigators were not convinced. At 3:12 p.m., while the sheriff's office was still locking down the scene, an unexpected call came into dispatch. A man said he wanted to turn himself in. He sounded panicked and out of breath. He said he threw his gun and was waiting for police. He did not provide details about the shooting, but he made statements about wanting officers to shoot me, and said he could not handle what he had done. When the dispatcher asked where he was, he said he was in the parking lot of the AMC movie theater several blocks away. Patrol units responded. They found a silver Nissan parked alone near the center of a lot. A young man sat inside without a shirt, his hands visible so officers would see he was unarmed. He stepped out and surrendered. When asked his name, he said Keith. When asked why he called, he said, "I made a mistake." Detectives now had a suspect in custody, a confirmed victim, and multiple witnesses who described the shooting. What they did not have was a motive. That answer would come later, and it would reveal a level of planning and influence that no one at the crime scene had suspected. Deputies placed Keith in the back of a patrol car and took him to the sheriff's office. On the ride, he kept asking officers if Brooklyn was alive. They told him they did not know. He stared forward and repeated that he made a mistake. Detectives noted that he never denied shooting her. At the command post near Home Depot, detectives compared witness statements to what they learned from dispatch. Many witnesses described the shooter as a young black male wearing a light blue shirt with reflective stripes. Surveillance video confirmed that the suspect matched that description. It also showed him walking directly down aisle 52 with purpose. He did not browse or pause. He did not appear confused. He located Brooklyn in seconds. Detectives pushed for more details from the inventory crew. They discovered that Brooklyn and her co-workers traveled together from Alabama to Florida for the job. They all stayed in the same hotel and spent most of their time together. Brooklyn was respected by her peers for her work ethic and her attention to the count sheets. Many of the younger employees saw her as the one who kept the team on track. One key question hung over detectives. Why would Brooklyn's former boyfriend drive from Alabama to Florida to shoot her inside a retail store? Detectives suspected that this was not a random emotional snap. The timeline suggested planning. They needed to establish what happened that morning. Detectives learned that Keith had called Brooklyn several times before the shooting. Brooklyn did not answer. Some co-workers said Brooklyn was tired of him calling and wanted distance. She wanted to focus on her daughter, her future, and a stable income. She felt Keith brought chaos into her life. She did not want that around her child. Detectives also noted the behavior of Sheila in the parking lot. She was not just a supervisor. She was a mother of the shooter and the grandmother of Brooklyn's child. Her connection to both sides gave her potential insight. Her collapse at the scene delayed questioning. Detectives decided to schedule an interview for later. Meanwhile, they turned their attention back to Keith. Detectives believed that if he turned himself in so quickly, he might be willing to talk. After being read his rights, Keith sat in an interview room wearing a jacket deputies had given him. His hair was wet from walking through a creek in the woods before calling 911. He cried and told detectives that no one cared about him. Detectives stayed patient. They asked about Brooklyn. They asked about their child. They asked about the morning. Keith told investigators that he and Brooklyn had a relationship that came and went. They never lived together, but they had a daughter named Casey. He admitted he had temper issues. He said arguments with Brooklyn sometimes ended with broken items at home. Brooklyn once got a restraining order because of his behavior, but she still allowed occasional visits because of their child. He said things had been peaceful the previous weekend. Keith then introduced another detail. That morning, he received a call from an urgent care clinic telling him he tested positive for an STD. He became angry and convinced himself Brooklyn gave it to him. He said he called her to ask about it. She did not want to engage. She blocked his number. Keith said he got off work, drove home, retrieved his gun, and got on the interstate heading toward Pensacola. Detectives pressed him about the drive. Why would he bring a gun? Why make the trip over an STD phone call? Keith said he only wanted answers. He insisted he did not plan to kill her until the moment she dismissed him in aisle 52. He claimed he became overcome with rage. His explanation did not match the evidence. He admitted he had time to think while driving. He admitted he stopped once and considered turning around. He admitted that he walked straight to Brooklyn as soon as he entered the store. Detectives listened. They knew that these details suggested premeditation. They also knew there was more. When they informed Keith that they would be searching his phone, he asked for one of the detectives to return to the room. With tears still on his face, he said he lied about something. He said that he texted his mother before the shooting. He said those messages would reveal things that he did not tell detectives earlier. That disclosure shifted the investigation. Detectives now had a new potential participant. They believed the mother of the shooter was involved hours before the first gunshot. They just did not know how far that involvement went. Back at the crime scene, detectives collected statements from the two injured employees. They described hearing a brief exchange before gunfire but did not hear an argument. One remembered Brooklyn turning her head slightly and replying in an annoyed tone. Another said the shooter did not look frantic. He looked calm. He did not scream or shake. He pointed the gun and fired. Then he ran. Detectives requested footage from Home Depot's internal cameras. The video confirmed that Keith entered the store around 2:18 p.m. The shooting happened around 2:20 p.m. He fled through the front doors at 2:21 p.m. By 3:12 p.m., he was calling 911. That left roughly 50 minutes where he traveled down Davis Highway, discarded his weapon, parked at the movie theater, walked through the woods, and then decided to turn himself in. Detectives believe that decision to surrender was not remorse alone. It might have been the result of a plan unraveling. They suspected Keith expected a confrontation with police that did not happen. He may have wanted to die by police gunfire. His comments to dispatch supported that theory. While detectives built the case against Keith, they could not ignore Sheila. Witnesses said Sheila watched the entrance before the shooting. One said she walked outside and looked toward the parking lot several times. Another said she was on her phone constantly. Detectives asked for her device during their follow-up interview. 3 days after the shooting, detectives completed a forensic extraction of Keith's phone. Deleted messages were recovered. What they found contradicted nearly everything Sheila said at the scene. Instead of trying to stop her son, she engaged him for nearly 2 hours as he traveled toward her location. The messages showed knowledge, participation, and encouragement. Before detectives confronted her, they reviewed the exchange line by line and created a timeline. They believed that timeline would demonstrate intent, planning, and complicity. The killing did not start when a gun fired on aisle 52. It started when a text notification appeared on a mother's phone earlier that morning. Detectives entered the interview room with printed reports, photographs of the crime scene, and a timeline from dispatch. They needed to document every movement Keith made from the moment he left work in Alabama until the moment he dialed 911 from the AMC parking lot. The timeline mattered for 2 reasons. It showed time to think, and it showed intent. Keith sat across from them with his hands in his lap. When asked about the urgent care phone call, he nodded. He said he did not have symptoms. He said he was confused and embarrassed. He assumed Brooklyn was the source of his positive test. Detectives asked if he had been intimate with anyone else. He avoided the question at first, then admitted there was one other girl within the previous 2 months. Detectives asked if he verified incubation time for the STD. He said no. He said he did not look anything up. He said he felt betrayed. He said that betrayal sat with him on the highway as he drove toward Florida. Detectives shifted the focus to the gun. They asked why he retrieved it from his house before crossing state lines. Keith said he grabbed it without thinking. Detectives knew that statement was not strong. People who act without thinking rarely remember to bring a loaded handgun, confirm ammunition, and drive across a border toward a specific location. They noted his answer and moved forward. The interview then turned to the store. Keith said he parked, entered through the front entrance, walked past shoppers, and moved toward the lumber aisles. He said he scanned the overhead aisle numbers until he found 52. He said he recognized Brooklyn's posture and the way she bent forward to work. He said he approached and spoke. She turned briefly, answered, and turned away. He said his rage peaked. He said everything after that happened quickly. Detectives asked if he thought about his daughter in that moment. Keith started crying again. He said he thought about nothing. He said his mind went blank. Detectives pressed gently. They needed to know if the shooting felt planned or sudden from his perspective. Keith said the drive felt planned, but the decision to fire felt sudden. Detectives recognized that juries rarely accept that kind of divide. Once the shooting ended, Keith ran. He said he did not remember which direction he ran at first. Cameras later showed he went out the main entrance and turned right toward Davis Highway. Several witnesses chased after him briefly until he disappeared behind vehicles. No one continued the chase because they feared he still had the gun. Keith said his next memory was throwing the gun from the window of his car. Detectives asked why he threw it instead of keeping it. Keith did not have a clear answer. He said he did not want to hold it anymore. Seconds later, the gun bounced against pavement and landed near the sidewalk where Pensacola police would find it. From there, Keith turned into the AMC lot and parked. He said he sat in the car for several minutes, breathing hard and shaking. He said he got out and walked into the woods. He did not know why he went into the trees. He said his legs moved without thought. The woods were damp from rain the night before. He walked through a shallow creek. His shoes soaked through. His jeans collected mud. He said Keith considered hiding. He also considered calling police to kill him. Those thoughts collided until he walked back toward the parking lot and dialed 911. Detectives then confronted him about the messages to his mother. Keith stared at the floor. He said his mother was the only person he reached out to. He said he told detectives earlier that he did not plan the shooting. Now he admitted he sent messages to Sheila hours before the gunfire. Those messages included statements of intent. Detectives asked if his mother tried to stop him. Keith hesitated. He said she asked questions. Detectives asked if she challenged him. He paused for several seconds. He said she did not. Detectives concluded the interview and booked Keith into the county jail. Word of the arrest reached the victim's family. Brooklyn's mother cried when deputies informed her. Brooklyn's sister told local news reporters that her sibling wanted a normal life for her daughter and had plans to finish training that would lead to better work. The family drove to Pensacola to retrieve Brooklyn's belongings and to identify her body. Detectives now turned to Sheila. They invited her for an interview at the Washington County Sheriff's Office in Alabama. Investigators from Florida drove north for the meeting. They placed a body-worn camera on the table to record audio and video. Sheila sat across from the detectives with her hands folded. She looked tired. She said she had not slept since Friday. Detectives started with calm questions. They asked about her work. They asked about Brooklyn as an employee. They asked how long Brooklyn dated her son. Sheila spoke easily. She said Brooklyn was like a daughter. She said she loved her granddaughter. She said she never expected anything like this. Detectives transitioned to the text messages. They asked if she talked with Keith that morning. Sheila said yes. They asked what the messages were about. Sheila said she told Keith to calm down. She said she tried to de-escalate. Detectives then asked if she would be surprised to learn that they recovered all 67 deleted messages between her and Keith. Sheila's expression changed slightly. She looked toward the floor. She asked what they meant by recovered. Detectives read back several messages to her. In one, Sheila told Keith she would send the address of the store. In another, she told him not to shoot her car. In another, she told him to hurry. In another, she called him weak if he did not follow through. In another, she assured him she had not called the police. Sheila tried to explain that she was using reverse psychology. She said she was trying to provoke him into talking instead of acting. Detectives asked why she never warned Brooklyn. Sheila said she thought Keith was bluffing. Detectives pointed out that she paced outside the store and appeared to watch the entrance while on her phone. Sheila said she was waiting for employees to finish inventory. Detectives pointed out that she collapsed when deputies asked detailed questions at the scene, which prevented further questioning. Sheila said she was overwhelmed. Detectives noted all statements. They concluded there was enough evidence to charge her with principal to first-degree murder. That meant she was legally responsible for aiding or encouraging the crime. When she was told she would be arrested, she clasped her hands and whispered that she did not think Keith would go through with it. The community followed the case closely. News outlets labeled it a family tragedy mixed with influence, control, and anger. Many struggled to understand how a grandmother could text her son through a 2-hour journey toward the death of the mother of her grandchild. Others questioned how a conflict over an STD test spiraled into a killing inside a crowded retail store. Brooklyn's daughter, Casey, was placed with Brooklyn's side of the family while courts decided long-term custody. Relatives described Casey as bright and social. Detectives believed she would one day learn how her mother died and how her father spent life in prison. They also believed she would learn how her grandmother took part in the chain of decisions that led to her mother's death. Prosecutors built their case around 3 pillars plus one unanswered question. Pillar 1 was the video from inside Home Depot that captured the sequence of events. Pillar 2 was the forensic extraction from Keith's phone that revealed deleted messages. Pillar 3 was the recovered Glock and ballistic match to Brooklyn's wounds. The unanswered question was motive beyond anger. Prosecutors believed the text chain with Sheila helped answer that unanswered question better than anything Keith said in his interview. The extraction report showed that the text conversation began minutes after Keith received his test results. The timestamp was 10:37 a.m. The shooting happened at 2:20 p.m. That left nearly 4 hours for Keith to work, go home, retrieve his gun, enter his car, drive across state lines, and locate Brooklyn at her job. According to prosecutors, those hours represented premeditation. The early portion of the text showed Keith asking if Brooklyn was with Sheila at the hotel. Sheila confirmed. Keith said he would deal with Brooklyn when they got back to Alabama. Minutes later, he said he did not want to wait. Then he wrote that he was going to shoot her. Sheila did not scold him or demand he stop. She asked how far away he was. When Keith said he was leaving work, Sheila said she would send the address to the store, so Keith did not need to wait until they returned home. The report also showed Sheila warning him not to shoot near her car because she did not want to get hit. Prosecutors believed that message was important. It showed Sheila knew he was bringing a gun. It also showed that she expected a shooting to occur near her. Instead of urging him to turn around or calling police, she focused on her own physical safety. Prosecutors highlighted another part of the exchange. Sheila told Keith that if he did not kill Brooklyn, he was a weak man. It was direct and personal. Prosecutors argued that the statement was encouragement, not frustration. The defense argued that it was sarcasm. The jury later disagreed with the defense. The extraction report also revealed a separate batch of text between Sheila and Brooklyn several days earlier. Brooklyn sent a photograph from a doctor's appointment showing her lab results. The results showed she did not have the STD Keith accused her of giving him. Sheila acknowledged the message and told her son that Brooklyn did not have the disease. Keith apologized in their messages. He promised to improve and show respect. That context mattered because it undercut the idea that Brooklyn infected him and hid it. It also showed that Keith had other potential exposure sources, which he later admitted under oath. After the extraction, prosecutors subpoenaed hotel surveillance from the morning of the shooting. It showed Sheila stepping outside the entrance several times while on her phone. During those moments, she typed rapidly and looked toward the parking area. Prosecutors believed she was waiting for her son. When she saw him walk toward the entrance, she went back inside. Less than 2 minutes later, shots were fired in aisle 52. Friends of Brooklyn told detectives that the situation between Keith and Brooklyn had been strained for months. Brooklyn wanted stability. She wanted fewer arguments. She worried about what their daughter would hear or witness during fights. She left before their daughter could form strong memories of the conflict. Several co-workers said Brooklyn wanted co-parenting without drama. She believed distance was necessary for that to happen. Keith's family members painted a different picture. They said Brooklyn hurt Keith emotionally. They said she blocked him frequently and ignored calls about their daughter. Prosecutors did not challenge those statements directly. They argued instead that frustrations and disagreements never justify homicide inside a public workplace during business hours. While detectives compiled evidence, Brooklyn's family planned her funeral and petitioned the court for custody of Casey. Relatives told reporters Brooklyn wanted to raise Casey with love and patience. They said she worried about relationships that harmed her progress and she wanted better opportunities for her child than she had at 18. Brooklyn's sister told one journalist that she never expected her life to end inside a hardware store while strangers ran for their lives. By late 2023, prosecutors were ready to take Keith to trial. The courtroom was quiet as jurors watched the video from Home Depot for the first time. The footage had no audio. The camera showed Keith walking down aisle 52, Brooklyn working, and two co-workers nearby. Keith approached. Brooklyn turned her head. She walked forward slightly. Keith raised his arm. The camera angle blocked partial view during the shots. Then Keith turned and sprinted toward the exit. The entire event lasted 8 seconds. During cross-examination, the defense asked the detective if anyone saw Keith and Brooklyn argue for more than a few seconds. The detective said no. The defense argued that this supported an act of passion. Prosecutors countered that passion does not include a 4-hour lead-up and a 2-hour text chain about killing someone. Keith took the stand. He told the jury that he intended to confront Brooklyn but not kill her until she dismissed him. He said the phrase, "not this again," pushed him over the edge. Prosecutors reminded the jury that Keith told detectives he stopped in Loxley during the drive to think. They asked why a man thinking about confronting someone needed a gun. Keith said he did not have an answer. The jury returned a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. The judge imposed life without parole. Keith showed no visible reaction while deputies placed restraints on his wrists and led him out of the courtroom. Sheila faced trial next. Her trial was more complicated. The prosecution's primary burden was not proving she fired a gun. It was proving she encouraged the murder and helped make it possible. Prosecutors argued that the text chain showed coordination of time, location, and motivation. They said Sheila guided her son to Brooklyn like a target. Sheila's defense attorney argued that she was using sarcasm and anger to push her son into abandoning his plan. He said she did not believe he would kill the mother of his child. He asked the jury to consider that no mother wants to see her son behind bars. He said her texts were poorly worded attempts to keep him from driving back to Alabama with Brooklyn in the car where a child might witness violence. He said prosecutors took the worst interpretation of every message without context. Brooklyn's family sat through the trial silently. Reporters observed that they did not look at Sheila during testimony. When asked outside the courthouse about forgiveness, Brooklyn's mother said she wanted justice first. She said the rest would come later on a different timeline. When jurors began deliberations, observers believed the text evidence favored the prosecution. The jury could not reach a verdict. One juror refused to agree. A mistrial was declared. Reporters noted that one juror admitted to working crossword puzzles during testimony. A second trial was scheduled for the following year. The retrial took place in August of 2025. New jurors filled the box. Prosecutors adjusted their approach. They focused less on broad emotional framing and more on direct cause and effect. They highlighted timestamps. They highlighted location data. They highlighted the language in Sheila's messages that influenced Keith's decisions from the moment he left work to the moment he arrived at Home Depot. The prosecution opened by displaying a synchronized timeline on a courtroom monitor. On one side were the text messages. On the other side were the GPS records and store cameras. Jurors saw how Keith texted at 11:40 a.m. asking for the address. Jurors saw how Sheila typed back that she would send it. Jurors saw how Keith then got on the interstate. Jurors saw how the Home Depot entrance camera recorded Sheila stepping outside at 2:18 p.m., phone in hand. They saw how 17 seconds later Keith entered the store. 2 minutes after that, Brooklyn was dead. Prosecutors then called a digital evidence specialist. He testified that the deleted messages between Sheila and Keith were recovered in full. He explained how deletion does not remove content from a phone's memory until overwritten. He confirmed that no outside party sent the messages. They were sent from Sheila's device. He also confirmed that the tone and language did not change between segments. The prosecution used this point to dismiss the idea that Brooklyn had the phone or someone else typed those messages. Next, prosecutors addressed motive. They did not claim Sheila hated Brooklyn. In fact, several texts showed affection. Prosecutors argued that affection did not prevent the murder. They told jurors that sometimes people encourage violence not because they want someone dead, but because they want someone punished, humiliated, or silenced. In this case, prosecutors argued that Sheila wanted to hurt Brooklyn for making Keith angry and for creating financial and emotional strain within their family. After the digital evidence, prosecutors called co-workers. They testified about Brooklyn's personality, her work performance, and her attempts to build stability for her child. One co-worker described holding Brooklyn's hand for several seconds before running out of the aisle. Another said she could still hear the sound of Brooklyn collapsing when she tried to step backward. Those statements gave context to the final moments inside aisle 52. Prosecutors then called the lead detective. He explained why prosecutors believed Sheila helped make the shooting possible. She provided the location. She provided the time frame. She did not warn authorities. She did not warn Brooklyn. She pushed Keith to act sooner rather than later. She did not tell Keith to stop. She did not tell him to turn around. She did not call 911 when she learned he was crossing the state line with a gun. The detective told jurors that influence can be as dangerous as a weapon when directed at someone who is already unstable. The defense countered by recalling Keith. He took the stand wearing a prison jumpsuit and handcuffs. He said nothing his mother did influenced his decision. He said he was going to kill Brooklyn whether Sheila helped or not. He said his mother always thought he talked big and never followed through. He said she did not believe him. The defense argued this showed Sheila lacked intent. The prosecution then cross-examined Keith. The exchange was short. The prosecutor asked if Keith would have known where Brooklyn was working if Sheila had not told him. Keith said no. The prosecutor asked if Keith would have gone to a different city searching for her if Sheila had not sent the address. Keith said he did not know. The prosecutor asked if Keith's text messages showed he waited for updates from Sheila. Keith agreed they did. Jurors watched Keith struggle to answer without contradicting himself. Next, Sheila testified. She explained her approach to raising Keith. She described him as volatile, emotional, and prone to exaggerated talk about violence. She said that in the past, she calmed him through sarcasm. She said she believed calling him weak would make him abandon his threats. She said she did not think he would kill Brooklyn. She said she loved Brooklyn as family and she loved Casey. She said the last thing she wanted was a prison sentence for her son or herself. During cross-examination, the prosecutor asked if sarcasm normally involves sending someone the address of their target. Sheila said she panicked. The prosecutor asked if sarcasm normally includes warning someone not to shoot your car. Sheila said she was afraid. The prosecutor asked why she never called police. Sheila said she did not want to ruin Keith's life. The prosecutor paused. She asked whether Keith ruined his own life that afternoon inside Home Depot. Sheila looked down and nodded. Both sides delivered closing arguments. The prosecution told jurors that encouragement does not have to sound like hatred. It can sound like cooperation. It can sound like logistics. It can sound like silence. The defense told jurors that Sheila was a mother trying to prevent a disaster through poor judgment rather than intent. Jurors deliberated for nearly 3 hours. They returned with a verdict of guilty on principle to first-degree premeditated murder. Under Florida law, the conviction carried a mandatory life sentence without parole. The judge imposed it immediately. Sheila did not speak as she was let out of the courtroom. Her daughter-in-law cried softly in the back row. Brooklyn's family held hands and stared ahead. During sentencing remarks, Brooklyn's mother addressed the court. She said Brooklyn wanted a peaceful life for her daughter. She said Brooklyn liked quiet mornings, steady income, and weekends with family. She said Casey was growing and starting to resemble Brooklyn. She said Casey lost her mother, her father, and her grandmother in one chain of decisions over an STD test that was misinterpreted and manipulated into something catastrophic. The judge thanked her for her remarks and reminded everyone that courtrooms deal with consequences, not restoration. He said no sentence could restore a life or heal a family. He said the law provided only one remedy in this case. Brooklyn was buried in Alabama. Family and friends placed flowers near her headstone. Several co-workers traveled to attend. They described the funeral as quiet. They said Casey looked curious and unaware of the meaning of the gathering. One relative said she hoped one day Casey would understand how loved her mother was. In Pensacola, employees at the Home Depot returned to work weeks after the shooting. The aisle was restocked. The floor was scrubbed. The store reopened. Most shoppers had no idea what occurred in that aisle. Only workers who were there on August 11, 2023, still remember the sudden chaos, the shouted orders to run, and the flashes of police lights outside the entrance. This case left behind no heroes. It left behind a child who would grow up with questions about a father who surrendered in a parking lot, a grandmother who encouraged him through text messages, and a mother who was killed before she reached 19.